Shopify Masters is powered by Shopify, the easiest way to sell online, in person, and anywhere in between. To get an extended 30-day trial, visit shopify.com/masters.
You always need to try to make yourself redundant. So as an entrepreneur in whatever you're doing. So like kind of early on, you for us, it was this journey, right? It was 3 of us. We're doing pretty much everything. Then we hired someone, for instance, for the kitchen, or like to early on to just clean the floor and cut the vegetables.
Hey, my name is Felix, and I'm the host of Shopify Masters. Each week, we learn the keys to success from e-commerce experts and entrepreneurs like you. In this episode, you'll learn why to go through other entrepreneurs to reach investors, which numbers are most important to VCs in the e-commerce space, and what kind of companies are better off fundraising versus bootstrapping. Today, I'm joined by Jonathan Wines from Damakan.com. That's DAHMAKAN.com, which creates healthy gourmet lunch and delivers straight to your office and based out of Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia, and was started in 2014. Welcome, Jonathan.
Hey, thanks a lot for having me.
Yeah, for sure. So yeah, tell us a little bit more about these, the product, the lunch that you sell and the store that you started.
Yeah, so we pretty much started Damakan in end of 2014, completely bootstrapped. At the very beginning did everything ourselves. So we quickly put up like a Shopify website, and then straight away started cooking ourselves, delivering ourselves. Pretty much did everything ourselves. Yeah, saw then a very good traction, and then kind of grew from there. So we then raised a couple of smaller angel rounds, and then most recently also a VC round, and built our business from. We changed like kind of from 3 co-founders preparing all the food ourselves, delivering all the food ourselves, to having now like a fully experienced kitchen team and a whole tech and marketing team. To now we are around 40 plus people.
Wow, that's amazing. So when you first launched, how many meals did you have on the menu?
So it started pretty much like in terms of the product was like you had to pre-order 2 days in advance. We had one dish per day, so we were only delivering lunch. And we would basically tell you, okay, order today for 2 days in advance, and then we deliver between like 10 a.m. to 1 p.m. We couldn't during that time specify the exact timing would deliver. And now we have 3 different dishes that change daily, and you can order lunch or dinner, as well as pick like a delivery time slot. So it got a bit more convenient for customers.
Mm-hmm. And who are you trying to target at the time? Like, what did you see? What demographic did you see in the market that was being underserved that you guys wanted to go after?
So it's we basically the whole vision was to make it very, very simple to eat good food every day without the hassle of and either like driving around to find a restaurant that delivers or that serves good food that you can eat every day without any guilt. But at the same still is affordable. So initially we basically pretty much just arrived in Malaysia like 3 to 4 weeks prior of launching, and for us obviously given that we were like mainly foreigners, so 2 out of the 3 are foreigners, and we wanted to make sure we really target like a broad market. So it would have been easy to really just focus on the expats, but we try to avoid that. So therefore also like the initial customer acquisition was very much kind of on the street, going into certain like coffee shops, or like waiting in kind of in front of similar restaurants and trying to catch there the first customers, speak to them, try to understand as much as possible about their daily kind of problems to eat good food, and win them on as kind of first early adopters.
Okay, so you were going to essentially alternatives that your ideal customer was already going to, right? To these restaurants and everything, and then you were stopping them and just trying to get a better understanding of what they're interested in buying and what they maybe were missing what they felt was missing in their current, I guess, lunch options. So what were you exactly asking them? How did you guys uncover that there was a potential market here? Was there competition already?
So what we saw basically in Kuala Lumpur, there were a lot of different, very small players, mainly like home-based businesses. So say like a mother with like 2 kids who then start to cook for their friends, maybe delivering like 10, 20, maybe up to like 50 meals every day to more or less like friends, family, and maybe their colleagues. So we knew there was like a market, and we saw like a lot of small players in this, but obviously we didn't really know like first of all, how big is the market, who are the exact customers, what is the real problem we are solving, because initially it could have been maybe just really nice food. So yeah, we for instance one very memorable experience was that we went into like a coffee shop, and there was like one guy basically like sitting in the sun with this full suit, like eating a salad, and so he seemed like a very interesting person to speak to. So we just went up to him and asked him kind of like, well, in a sense, like what's your job, why are you here, kind of where do you work, and found out pretty much every day he walked like 10, 15, 20 minutes through the sun in order just to get some kind of different food. And there was also one of our early customers, and he really loved it. He immediately told us like, okay, I will order every day. And first we thought like, okay, everybody tells you that, right? Everybody tells you that it's a great idea. So we didn't have really the expectation he would do that, but yeah, he did it, and he kind of then referred all of his colleagues, ordered for his spouse, ordered for his parents, etc. And there was, I guess, also the initial growth, like really through the customers, like very organically, a lot of word of mouth, and that also helped us a lot and to really learn from customers as much as possible.
Yeah, so you mentioned that you started this business off by bootstrapping. Were you guys all working other jobs at that point? How did you fund the very early beginnings of the company?
It was pretty much self-funded. So we all 3 of us were on board full-time. And I think after roughly 4 to 5 months, then we started to get our first angel on board.
Okay, so you guys were already in the business full time right from the beginning.
Yeah, exactly. Because we initially was like we wanted to test it as fast as possible, and therefore we decided to quit our jobs and try it full time, and then kind of would have made the decision after a couple of months if traction wouldn't have happened as we imagined, then I guess we would have to either pivot or go back to our jobs. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So you already were doing these surveys, you could better understand the market. What did you want to do with an actual test? Like, how did you know for sure that there was going to be people willing to pay for this? Like, what was that initial testing that you guys were doing the first few months to determine if it was going to be a viable business or not?
Yes, I mean, obviously, because it's food, it's not so easy, because you could basically, or our biggest fear was in the sense that we serve good food and people just order because it's food, because they like to try something new, or because it's something cool, kind of, you order your lunch on the internet. So there was kind of, like a bit harder to test, I think, maybe than other products. For us, really, kind of the proof of concept came through 2 things. First of all, the organic growth and the word of mouth that I mentioned, and then and also the frequency. So it's not was that people ordered like weekly, maybe even daily. Some guys. So it was not like they tried it out 1 time, 2 times, and then dropped off. So retention rate was an important part. And then lastly, it was simply because we did everything, and none of us really had like a professional chef background or like any major cooking experience, so that people really they loved the food, and the service told us then in a sense the food was important, but it's not that we had early on these like 5-star hotel chefs that we have now. So it was also kind of important to have a little bit this this more like amateur food production sense.
So you found that it wasn't just about the food itself. It was like what about the service? Do you think that resonated with people?
Yeah, so I think what I described earlier, so it was quite inconvenient, I would say, initially to order. So it was like really you had to pre-order 2 days in advance, and then we would deliver in like a very wide time slot, so from 10 to 1 p.m. So all of these things told us kind of, okay, it's people really need this, and it's not just something nice to have. And that was pretty much a very important part for us.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so you mentioned that after a few months, you felt like you brought on your first angel investors. What made you guys decide that you needed to raise this capital?
Yeah, so the main consideration was simply that we saw the traction. We kind of had the proof of concept, and then obviously the three of us were busy full time with the operations, with the going to the supermarket, going to the wet market to buy the ingredients, and chopping vegetables until like all afternoon, and then cooking until like late night hours, like until like 4 a.m. We were sometimes roasting pumpkins, getting up again at like 7 or 8 a.m., finishing up the cooking, and then delivering again. So there was pretty much almost no time to do anything else, and that was one of the main considerations, to make it a bit more scalable, and to especially like free our time and then go to the next level and hire really experienced chef teams, etc.
So you guys felt like you were just being stretched way too thin, and you needed that investment was it to hire people?
Or basically to free our time a bit, exactly.
Gotcha. Okay, so how were you able to identify or find these angel investors? I think that there are other listeners listening to this podcast that are in that similar situation where they have kind of figured out a market, but they just don't have the resources, whether it means the time or money to get it to the next level. So how were you able to identify what kind of angel investors to try to go after?
I think it always depends, I guess, in the country you're in, the kind of I guess also the funding environment. For us was very much, so that the first two angels were like, so the first one was like a friend of one of my co-founder from like kind of 10 years ago. So there was definitely a level of trust. Yeah. And the angel had some interest basically also in the category, so like in F&B, and also a bit more in kind of this health and fitness segment. So that obviously helped quite a bit. Otherwise, I think, for us the additional challenge was in the sense we completely started in a new country, so we didn't have any network here. Otherwise, I think the best thing is really to try to find angels who have interest in the segment, and then try to get an introduction from a very warm lead there. So either like an entrepreneur who was funded previously from the angel, or someone who knows the angel very well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so you're not just looking for somebody that has money. You're looking for someone that is reachable in some way through your network, and also already working in the space in some capacity, whether it means they have a company in the exact same space, or they are just very interested in that particular market. What kind of preparation did you need to do before approaching an angel for an investment?
I guess it depends very much on the angel, but in general, for any investor, obviously you have to make a strong case. You have to know your numbers. You need to be able to communicate a broader vision that you want to achieve, and then I think it's especially important to know kind of what the angel is looking for, because on an angel level it's, I guess, different than on a VC level, where it's very much number driven and kind of very similar in terms of the typical questions that you receive. For angel might be quite different, because it's more most of these guys are very much they're investing on the one hand because they're interested in the space or in a particular angle. So for us, it could have been the food production, could have been kind of the logistics angle, because that's also what we were doing on the tech side. It could be maybe also, for instance, the country or the region. But at the end of the day, angels are investing basically in the team and in you, and that's kind of the biggest thing in that.
Makes sense. So, like you mentioned, VCs are venture capitalists are a little bit different once you have are ready to move on to the next stage beyond the angel investment. Talk to us a little bit about this. Like, what other kind of differences have you noticed when you have pitched to an angel and got funding, and now have pitched to VCs and have gotten funding?
I think the two big differences are, first of all, it's a very different process. So you need much more time to be able to raise from a VC, because they obviously most of these guys they're managing other people's money, so they have a much more structured approach there. They need to do like a due diligence. They need to get the approval from their LPs, from the limited partners. So it takes much longer, and they need to tick pretty much all the boxes. And then it's very much stage depending. So if you raise from a VC very early on, it's more similar to an angel, but the longer or the later stage you receive VC investments, obviously also the process change a bit. Meaning, so initially on, because you might have some early on traction, that's great and it's important, but early on it's really all about the team and about the vision. And the later stage the funding gets, the less important those factors become, the more important it is that you really have solid numbers. So for us, we raised what I mentioned, two angel rounds, and then we had a VC round. So it was not as early as maybe other seed funding. So the numbers were definitely important, but at the same time also still it was very much about the vision, very much about the team, etc. And VCs obviously they some of them have different preferences, but it's always a typical question, what has been the traction, what has been the growth numbers. Depending on the funding environment, also profitability becomes more relevant. That was also quite interesting for us. So the early kind of conversation we had 1 or 2 years ago was all about growth. And now we're speaking again to VCs for the next funding round, and unit economics are much more important. Profitability or the potential path to profitability are much more important, and much more frequent questions that pop up pretty much every meeting. 1 year ago, 2 years ago, that was very different. So I think the general funding environment has quite a big role also in terms of what VCs are looking for.
So just to give the audience an idea of the amount of time something like this takes, can you share the time frame it took for from the first meeting to receiving the funds for both the angel investors and then the VC round?
Sure. So the angel round was very quick. So it was a couple of calls basically. There was, I think, took 2 calls within 2 weeks, and then the angel flew over, and then after the meeting, pretty much, so he looked at our operations on the ground, and then basically right after the meeting, he told us, okay, I'm willing to invest this amount, and we started to discuss valuation, etc. So the whole process was extremely fast, took maybe 3 to 4 weeks until then we also got the money. With the VCs, took much longer. So we started too late in a sense. So we started approaching investors way too late. But still took roughly 4 to 6 months from the first time we approached investors until until we really had the money in the bank. And that was even considered very fast. So now we are we're starting much earlier. So we're now looking to raise another funding round, and we're starting now with the expectation to close in the next 6 to 8 months. And we know we have to now go full steam in a sense to make that happen.
Mm-hmm. Do you have to go through a lot of gatekeepers to reach the decision maker, especially when you are going after the VC funding?
It depends. It depends on what the initial contact is. So if it's therefore the most important lesson was definitely that warm introductions are the most important part. So you basically you find an entrepreneur who has received funding, for instance, this VC, and then you kind of build a relationship, or you get the introduction from this person to this. So kind of you pitch first to the entrepreneur, and then the entrepreneur kind of makes a warm introduction to the VC, and then most of the time, this would go straight to the partner or to the managing director, and then it's a much faster process than if you're trying to go like kind of via the cold approach angle. You for instance, you find someone on LinkedIn and reach out to them on LinkedIn, then it's much harder, and you would probably first speak to like even if you manage to speak to one of the decision makers, they will tell you, okay, here, please, speak to my analyst or to my investment manager, and then you kind of have to work your way up, and that takes much longer, and it's much more difficult. Plus, most VCs also they see really that it's kind of a first test for them, in the sense of the ability of the entrepreneur. Can the entrepreneur find his way straight to the decision maker, or through like a warm lead and through someone they trust, maybe someone they have invested in with. That's kind of a very good sign for them first, for how well the entrepreneur can execute.
So the investor looks to see how resourceful that entrepreneur is, and it's interesting that you're saying that you want to go through other entrepreneurs that have received investments from these VCs in order to get that introduction. So when you are trying to reach out to these these entrepreneurs, are they typically direct connections, or did you have to build up to get to them too through through your network?
It's pretty much both. Yeah, I mean, ideally you already know them. Maybe because they're in a similar segment. Say, for instance, for us, maybe they're in food or food tech, or in logistics, or do something with a similar angle. Then I think it's in generally interesting to reach out to them and have a general chat. Otherwise, if there's no direct relationship, then you can try to look for any other similarities. And the important part is basically, because obviously what this entrepreneur does is when he introduces you to their investor, for instance, they kind of have to be sure that what you're doing makes a lot of sense, and could provide value to their investor. So that's very important. So
the reputation is also on the line by making this introduction.
Exactly. So you basically first have to pitch to an entrepreneur in a sense, and then they're extremely helpful to introduce you to the investor or other entrepreneurs who can help with the introduction, because obviously everybody knows kind of how hard it is to get funding, and they have been there. They also they know if they help you now, maybe one day you can help them in a sense, and so therefore normally other entrepreneurs are extremely open to help, and very grateful also then.
When you pitch to an entrepreneur that is on your way to getting access to that VC investor, do you pitch them differently than you would pitch to the VC?
I think it's rather similar. I mean, it's not such a direct pitch, right? It's really more. So therefore, also in kind of with the timing that it takes, it's really, you want to build up the relationship, right? If you now write an entrepreneur the same way you would write kind of a cold email to an investor, kind of it has the same effect. In most cases, they will not be helpful, or like, right, if you just tell them, hey, we're doing XYZ, can you introduce me to this guy? And they're like, okay, I don't know you, why would I do that, right? So it's kind of better to as early as possible to kind of start the conversation, maybe ideally speak about something else, see if you can in any way can provide value to them. Maybe you see you have a great idea for their business, or you see something that could be useful for them. Maybe saying, for instance, they work in a very different space. Maybe they're trying to do, I don't know, for instance, logistics, and you have someone like a great software developer you could introduce to them, then that's obviously something much better, right, than if you just write them like, hey, can you introduce me to this guy? That's not so good. But otherwise, the pitch is very similar. And again, given that's a reputation risk for them in a sense, it's not just that you seem like a like a trustworthy person, etc., and what you're doing makes a lot of sense. But also that you kind of know that it's relevant for the investor, and that's also the same thing. If you approach an investor, in most cases, it's really about being really focused instead of trying to speak to as many investors as possible. So it's there was, I guess, also a big lesson that we learned. If you see an investor with like only fintech companies in their portfolio, then it's rather unlikely that this guy will invest in you if you, for instance, you're in the food tech space, right? So it's better to go to an investor who has existing companies in the space, or you know that they're interested in terms of the sector and the industry that you're in. That's number one. Number two is in terms of course, the size, right? It doesn't make sense to speak to, if you want to get seed funding, to speak to someone who does Series B or Series C, and they basically, all of the rounds, the previous rounds they have invested in were all like in single or double digit millions, right? Then that normally also means they need to deploy a lot of capital, and for them it wouldn't make sense, for instance, to invest like $100,000 or something like that. So the stage is super important. And and then also geography and other factors, right? So it's really about also to make a good impression also to the entrepreneur who could introduce you, that you really know kind of everything about this investor you want to get an introduction to. So in terms of like industry focus, in terms of stage focus, in terms of geographic focus, and ideally in terms of kind of what they are interested in, what they're potentially excited about. If you see a VC has written, for instance, about fitness or something like that, and you can mention that into the pitch, either to the entrepreneur or to the VC, that obviously shows you did your homework, and you're not just randomly looking for introduction, right?
Mm-hmm, makes sense. So you mentioned a few different things earlier about what VCs focus the most on, and they were all kind of related to the numbers. So profitability, you mentioned unit economics, you mentioned the path to profitability. Let's talk about each one at a time. So when a VC is looking at profitability, are they just looking at the raw numbers? Like what is it that they are? What should an entrepreneur be focused on when they're building a company that they're looking for an investment? How should they look at their profitability numbers?
I think, obviously it depends a bit on the kind of the industry you're in and the product, but like especially for e-commerce, I think the funding environment has changed quite a bit. So profitability is important. So either, obviously it's very difficult for a startup early on to be profitable. But the important part is kind of you have a clear path to profitability. So you either you kind of first of all you kind of know, for instance, the number of sales you have to do in order to break even, and or you can also justify that very much on a unit economics level. So you know different margins. For instance, your contribution margin. You know how much you make from each unit you sell, and how many you have to sell in order to break even on different levels. So for instance, when do you break even before kind of operating, marketing and tech investments? When do you break even before marketing, for instance, and when do you overall break even or are cash flow positive?
Mm-hmm. And do you want to be in a situation where with the capital, with the funding that the investor is going to give you, it would not necessarily immediately, but have a direct impact on improving those numbers? Is that what they're looking for? That their investment will have a direct impact on improving the numbers, the profitability, the unit economics, and all those numbers that they're looking at?
I think it depends a bit kind of what the reason is here you're raising funding from them, right? So I don't think it has to be like this, but I think the key lesson really, the key message you want to convey is really you have a clear path to profitability eventually, and they kind of they know that you're not going to increase your burn rate significantly, and then you might in a couple of months or you might have to look for follow-on funding, and maybe you didn't really think about how you get that, and you just will you underestimate kind of the funding environment. I think that's a more important part. So they're like a bit getting a bit risk averse on that level.
Mm-hmm. And once you do get this funding from an angel or a VC, how do you continue to work with them after all the paperwork is done, they've given you the money? How do you continue to interact with them?
I think it really depends on the type of VC. So if it's a VC or like the type of investor in general, they're very different investors, right? Some of them are extremely hands-on. They are really keen to help operationally and potentially also with the strategy, etc. For instance, we had some of our investors have extremely be helpful in terms of making introduction to potential hires. They have to help basically to close kind of high potential hires. For instance, they also called them, spoke with them, kind of convinced them from their perspective that what we're doing makes a lot of sense, etc. Yeah, so kind of helped a bit on the selling part. Of course, also for follow-on funding, they can make a lot of introduction to other investors. Again, they can help you with kind of sharpening your pitch and your message. At the same time, other investors are extremely hands off. Basically, they because if they invest in a year in 10, 20, 50 companies, obviously it's very, very difficult for them to be very hands on. So it very much depends. But in general, I think especially as an entrepreneur, obviously you want to kind of keep them updated. You want to maintain, further nurture the relationship, and make sure kind of you keep them happy, obviously, with the progress you make, right? And because it's a long journey, right? And it's very important to kind of have a very good relationship with them.
Yeah, I hadn't considered that there are much more than just sometimes the monetary value that these investors give you. Is it possible to identify early on or even before you meet with these investors what kind of value they'll give you, whether it be the introductions, whether it be the industry expertise, or whether it be just kind of hands off, here's the funds and just a very hands-on approach to working with you. Are you able to identify that before even approaching a VC?
I think the important part is really also that investors do their due diligence on you and your business, but it should also be the other way around. So you shouldn't just take money kind of from anyone, right? It's very important that you do kind of due diligence on your potential investor, and that you. It depends obviously in what kind of situation you're in, but that you choose your investor or your future investor very carefully, and with a view, first of all, what's your expectation? What are you trying to get out of them? Is it just the money, or is it certain operational support? And also, for instance, with a view for future funding rounds, right? So that obviously always helps if it's like a big fund. If you see they do follow on investments, which for some VCs, for instance, they're not allowed to make follow on investments, or they have like a certain limit kind of capital they can deploy to a certain company. And those are all things you want to check out beforehand.
When you say follow on investments, you're talking about subsequent investment rounds that they would contribute to?
Yeah, exactly. It also depends on the fund size, right? If someone has like a lower digit million fund, and they already invested quite a lot into your business, then the likelihood is also very low that they could follow on with in subsequent rounds. And and again, the important part kind of this due diligence that you do. So ideally, you speak to a couple of their portfolio companies. You could even, right, if you're in an investment process, you could even simply ask them, right, who are companies that you actively work with. Could I speak to one of them? Could you make an introduction to the founders, right? And that they should be also quite willing to do that. Otherwise, you can also basically go the other way around and just approach a company they have invested in, kind of reach out to the founder and say, hey, we're right now in discussion with these guys. are you free to have a chat? And then you try to find out how do they work with their entrepreneurs, and try to get a feeling how the relationship is there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so this is all great insight into the kind of the investment world for e-commerce businesses. Now, for all the listeners out there, can you talk a little bit about what kind of company, whether the industry or the stage that they're at, what kind of company makes the most sense to, not makes the most sense, but what kind of company is better off looking for investments, and which companies might be better off, avoiding working with investors? Or do you have a clear identification for which ones are a better fit for investments versus not?
I think it's. That's a very difficult question. Mm-hmm. I think it's. In general, you should also, before you raise funding, right? You should really think about, do you want to raise funding? I think that's a very important consideration, because the moment, obviously, you take on someone's money, you have there an obligation and a responsibility, and a lot of things might change. And if you have been completely bootstrapped, and you want to have the 100% flexibility in all of your decision, and want to be able to make a lot of pivots, that these kind of things get a bit harder, right? At the same time, obviously, you can go much faster with what you're currently doing or what you're planning to do. So communications and simply very important, very, very important with your investors, right? So I think that's something also. Again, you should kind of consider beforehand. Do you really want to have an investor, and do you really kind of also need to, right? I think a lot of businesses, for instance, also can definitely work without any investor, right? Without any outside funding. And I think there are also like some huge examples that never raised money and then went straight to IPO, right? If that's the goal. So I think it really depends on kind of your vision and what you want to do. For us, it was very much we wanted to have on the one hand, the operation support, and we simply wanted to also go much faster, and therefore we decided to raise funding. And if you're saying fintech or biotech or something like with a lot of capex, etc., then I guess it's also it's pretty much impossible if you can't to kind of self-fund that.
Right. I realize that it's definitely a question that has so many variables involved, and it's really almost a personal question about where you want to take the company. And of course, some industries will require this kind of investment much more than other industries. So then, for you guys, when you did raise these funds, were they initially specifically for hiring staff? Like, what did you need the money for right off the bat?
Yeah, exactly. So for us, was early on was very much to first of all free our time from the kind of operational, everyday tasks. Yeah, because we what I mentioned, we pretty much did everything. Yeah, and obviously as an entrepreneur, you always kind of have to think of what's kind of what are my priorities, and what are the things I should be working on, or what should I do? And in our case, cutting carrots or cleaning the floor was maybe not the most high priority work or the best use of our time in a sense. So those were the kind of things that we quickly then outsourced or basically hired staff for. And then the next thing was simply also for us to move from this kind of home-based business in a sense to have a really professional setup, and set up a kitchen, hire really experienced chefs, etc. That obviously costs all money, and then especially in the later rounds, then the whole tech part. So the difference for us is basically that we're not just kind of producing the food, but we also deliver it, and we in a sense own the logistics part. We have the very tight control over, so we have developed our own routing algorithm and quite a lot of sophisticated tech on the back end, on the logistics back end. And there we needed really great, smart developers who could help us build that.
Mm-hmm. So once you did free up your time, what did you guys want to focus on immediately once you were no longer doing all the cooking and you now have that time to focus on the business? What did you guys want to attack first?
The big part was to further, talking really early on was really do much more customer research and discovery in a sense. Really spend much more time really speaking to customers, figuring out what they want and what's the problem that you're solving. So I guess a bit more on the positioning and on the strategic side, and then after a while also, of course, marketing and what I mentioned, just the tech part.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, speaking of the tech, I noticed once I went to the website, you guys have an app as well for Android devices and iOS devices. When did this come along? When did you guys decide to develop apps these two apps for your business?
So it's pretty much roughly 1 year ago we kind of launched the first version, and then now since like 6 months ago we did a major overhaul of the app and relaunched it in a sense.
And what made you decide to go this route to create these apps rather than just having people go to the mobile website or the desktop website?
For us, it was pretty much because it's because of the food delivery. So the product we want to make it as convenient as possible, and we try to also look for another order channel and also another way to remind people, right? So I mean, on the website you have you can, for instance, or you can use email, etc., right, to remind people. Obviously, if at the same time you're also on the person's phone, and you can send push notifications, you can send SMS, etc., and you simply have another order channel for them that they can easily access when they are, for instance, on the go, when they're, in taxi or on a train. That was for us important to kind of have more potential touch points with the customer.
Like these notifications or just being a presence on their device rather than having them be reminded themselves to come visit you. You are always sort of in their face, maybe not intrusively, but definitely much more likely for them to see and be reminded to purchase from you. Now, if someone wants to, or at least for your experience, how did you guys go about creating an app? I mean, it sounds like a pretty big challenge that is definitely much more technical than just setting up an e-commerce site. What was the process for you guys to create the application?
Yeah, no, it's much more complicated, right? So, for instance, our first website was really amazing. I was able to put it up myself, so I learned a little bit like HTML and a little bit CSS. But pretty much, I didn't know anything about website in a sense, and I was able to together with the help of Shopify, right, to put up a really nice designed, or at least from my perspective, nice designed and well-functioning website within, I think it was 1 or 2 days, and be ready to accept the first order. So that was very amazing, right? The whole apps, obviously, that's much more difficult. So I pretty much couldn't have done it. So we have a CTO who then worked with the development company. So initially we engaged a development company in India because we simply also obviously funding were limited and we wanted to be very fast. So this worked very well until a certain point. I mean, still took quite a long time. I think it took 6 to 9 months until we had like a first version where people could order. But however, then after a while also it became more and more complex, and then we moved this more in-house and hired developers in-house, etc., to be able to bring the app onto the next level. So again, much more complex, and for us the app is pretty much, it's like because we see a little bit different behaviors, right? On the website, people because you can pre-order for our service, and on the website people are pre-ordering more for several days in advance. It's more for those guys who sit down and then think a bit about their schedule, whereas like the app is more kind of a bit impulsive and kind of last minute. So therefore it's a bit different and quite complementary behavior on the different channels. But again, the app is it's much more complex to develop an app, especially if you want to. So ours are native apps, and you want to have a nice experience, right? I think there are a lot of kind of shortcuts you can try to do, but this might make the experience worse and then backfire.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think working with an outsourced development company can be it can take much longer than you might anticipate and can cost a lot more than you anticipate if you can kind of get a control of it early on. So going back, I know that you have a CTO that handles this, but if you maybe speak from your experience, if you could go back, what would you do differently to make sure that I guess the process it can be as smooth as possible when working with an outsourced development company?
I think I wouldn't do much differently. I mean, one really good thing we did early on when we kind of we let different companies or also freelancers kind of compete, right? So we set aside a small budget where we said, okay, this is just for testing out different freelancers, for instance, different developers there. So we say we allocated maybe 5 hours or maybe 10 hours per freelancer just for them to let them work on something that we could then easily compare across the different freelancers and then make a decision who would be the best person to work with. And that's important. I think one important lesson that we learned is it's not just the quality they produce in terms of the code or whatever, but it's very much the communication it's actually one of the most important parts. So it's super important. Or you can have an amazing developer, but if you cannot really communicate with him or her what you're trying to do, then this will cause you a lot of headache and takes a lot of time. And then it might be better to have someone who is slightly less competent on the coding part, but completely understands what you're trying to do. That's much better. So this communication part is extremely important, and therefore you should definitely test any freelancer you work with on that part. Yeah, how easy do you think it is to communicate with this person, and how quickly does that person get what you mean, in a sense? So that might also vary, right? It could be like I can work extremely well with one freelancer, and my co-founder couldn't work with this person at all. So it's also a bit on the individual level.
Right. It has to do a lot with just the fit between the personalities of you and then the people that you're working with, that you're hiring. So you mentioned that the company's now grown to over 40 people since starting. Tell us a little bit about this experience, because not a lot of entrepreneurs have the opportunity to go through this, to hire such a large company. What are some of the more difficult parts about scaling a business to over 40 people?
The interesting part is really this kind of that you, in a sense, you always need to try to make yourself redundant. So as an entrepreneur in whatever you're doing, so like kind of early on, you for us it was this journey, right? It was 3 of us. We're doing pretty much everything. Then we hired someone, for instance, for the kitchen, or like to early on to just clean the floor and cut the vegetables. Next part was to have someone who did the delivery. Next hire was then someone who was kind of managing the kitchen. And so we gradually kind of try to give away more and more parts of our roles, and in order to be able to work on the higher value things, in the sense, or like kind of the higher priority task. And that's something very difficult, because often you like to do certain things. So for instance, you like to maybe you like to be very much involved in, say, for instance, the kitchen process, or you love to think about like packaging or something like that, or you love to make a post on social media or design like a banner or something like that. But you really have to think of, okay, what does the company need, or what does the team need me to focus on, and be able to kind of give this away, and then obviously find people who can do it as good as you, or ideally even much better than you, right? And that's kind of the hard part. So to find the right people, and to also identify, obviously, what kind of people you need and what kind of tasks you need to give away, and then really build the entire company for us. I mean, we are first-time entrepreneurs in a sense. I mean, we have worked in startup setups before. But I think this was also quite a big change to really becoming a company, and instead of having this kind of home-based business, or like having a team of 5 where you trust everyone blindly, and everyone since 5 or 10 years. to having like really proper company setup and having to manage not just the company but also obviously the people, right, and keep them motivated, keep them inspired and engaged.
Yeah, I love that philosophy that as an entrepreneur, as a founder, you really want to always make yourself redundant, to have people that can take over the roles, take over the responsibilities that you had early on. The more you kind of iterate through that, the faster you can scale, the much more likely you can create a scalable company. So speaking of the growth, can you give us an idea of how successful or how much the business has grown since starting?
So we have been growing around 20 to 25% month on month since we started. Obviously, it's always you have like times where you grow extremely fast, and you have certain things you kind of have to figure out to reach the next growth stage. So that was also a very interesting experience for us. So it's what you see, kind of this hockey stick that everybody talks about. Kind of if you zoom out, you will see it in a sense, but if you zoom in, you will see a lot of different like extreme growth spurs, and then like a plateau, and then another huge kind of jump up. So that's also something, especially if you're like quite operationally heavy, like as we are, then that's something very interesting, I think, for me to have witnessed that over the last 2 years. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and for running a relatively complex e-commerce business, and as such with 40 employees, what kind of apps and tools or services do you rely on to run the business?
I think it's there's we kind of constantly looking also for additional tools. I think the hard part is obviously to get everybody on board to use it. Yeah. We pretty much work a lot with like Google Drive, all the Google spreadsheets, etc. It's quite interesting actually. You can also do a lot of things there that I previously didn't know about. You can automate a lot of processes. For instance, what we kind of built ourselves is an email sending tool, pretty much through Google Spreadsheets. So you dump into a spreadsheet all of the emails, for instance, like customers. When we want to send out a rain notification, we just copy paste all the email addresses into Google Spreadsheet, and then have like the text there, and then use Google Spreadsheets to send out a customized email to all of these customers. That's something we kind of built ourselves a little bit. Otherwise, we also use Slack for internal communication, a lot of WhatsApp, nevertheless. Personally for me, like DocuSign made the biggest difference. Yeah, like that you can simply sign, documents online, and you don't have to print them, etc. There was it's kind of silly in a sense, but for me, like freed a lot of my time. So.
Yeah, I guess there's a lot of paperwork in your line of work then. So what do you guys want to focus on this year? What are the goals for the business in 2017?
So 2017 is extremely interesting year for us. So we right now, we're starting the kind of the fundraising process to raise follow-on investment. And we have seen that in the last year we made a lot of progress, especially on the logistics technology part. So we focus more on growth in Kuala Lumpur here in Malaysia, and then we're also looking to expand into another market. And so that's we're very excited for that.
Awesome. Thanks so much for your time again, Jonathan. So damakan.com again is a website. DAHMAKAN.com is the website. Anywhere else you recommend the listeners go and check out if they want to follow along with what you guys are up to or what you're up to?
You can check out our Instagram and Facebook if you're looking for some nice tasty food pictures. Otherwise, definitely damakan.com is the right place to check out.
Awesome. Thanks so much for your time, Jonathan.
Cool. Thanks a lot, Felix.
Here's a sneak peek of what's in store for the next Shopify Masters episode.
For me, it was one of the most important investments we ever made because you live with your logo forever or variations of it. And if you get it right, it'll pay off.
Thanks for listening to Shopify Masters, the e-commerce marketing podcast for ambitious entrepreneurs. To start your store today, visit shopify.com/masters to claim your extended 30-day free trial.